Tim Santoni. He grew up around the private investigation business. And early in his career, he had the opportunity to learn the business from his dad, Mike Santoni. In 2011, he took over as president and CEO of Santoni Services, where he continues to innovate and lead the company. Santoni specializes in supporting law firms in civil litigation, which is employment law, insurance defense, intellectual property, family law, business litigation, things like that. Tim started an employment background screening, which is particularly important here in California, and he did that in 2015. In 2017, he rolled out an on-demand attorney services platform, because most of the work he does is with attorneys. So now he's been called to consult with attorneys and to be an expert witness for law firms in cases involving intellectual property theft and trademark infringement. So what he's going to be talking about us today is really interesting in terms of what goes on behind the scenes when you're trying to hire somebody here in California. Tim, welcome.
Thank you everyone for being here. A special thank you to a few people from my office, to Elaine and to Sammy and to Jackie and Shane for taking time to be here and spend some time with us. Appreciate them being here. So I guess I kind of want to start and talk about my perspective. So I operate an investigation and background screening company, right? And so I get to see the underbellies of businesses and what goes on behind the scenes, and I get to hear about different risk factors that are illuminated when people call us. And so I become very passionate about helping clients mitigate risk in their business and deal with things proactively. So that's kind of where I come from, and that's where I'm passionate about as it relates to this topic. So it's something I'm super passionate about, and I enjoy talking about it. So unfortunately, in today's day and age, we have this situation where we are not necessarily trusting everyone we do business with, and we want to obtain information and verify who they are and where they are because of the lack of trust that kind of exists. The challenge is that we have so much information floating around out there that is to cull through, to find it, to verify it, and to come up with something tangible and relevant and compliant is a challenge. And so we also operate in the state of California, where we have a very highly litigious environment that we operate within, and that makes it a little bit more risky as a business owner, right? So yes, we know that it's just a question of time before litigation will arise in your business. So whether you're starting a business, you have investment capital, or you're running a large brand, I think some of these principles that I'm going to talk about would apply to you and to your business. And I hope to answer any questions afterwards that are specific to your business. So. All right, so, in my world, the business processes, there's certain things that contribute to risk. Employees, right? We have to hire them. We have to provide them with benefits. We have to deal with payroll. We have to deal with workers' comp. We have to deal with the things they may create, the things that they may take with them, intentionally or unintentionally. Our vendors, our suppliers, our distributors, some people don't think about those, but they impact the product coming in or the services coming into our business, and they impact what our output could be, deliverability, the financial instability that comes with that. And also partners. As we start up, unfortunately, the highest number there's a lot of litigation in we call business divorces, where the partner you go into business with becomes someone that you become hostile with and have to deal with the asset division and the clientele and so forth. And also consultants, especially for startups who are having consultants come in and talk with them about how to be involved in their business. And I think it's super, super important that we understand how those can impact risk in our business, because we give them access to our information, our secrets, things that we're going to be doing in plans. And we need to be aware of how to protect ourselves on the front end so that we don't end up in litigation with those people that are supposedly helping us. And just to give a couple examples of this, so when it comes to theft that we see in our business, the tangible theft that used to occur when someone steals something is the thing of the past. But when we talk about vendors, suppliers, and distributors, I'll give you an example of a client that we work with. They had a pretty cool, novel retail product that they wanted to get into the consumer field, and they sourced it. They told us they sourced it with 30 people overseas in China. It's injection mold type of rubber plastic piece, they pared it down to 5, and then they were wondering why the product was ending up online in online e-commerce sites in China, Asia, and all over the world. And they didn't understand that their sourcing agent was really not protecting their business, they were protecting themselves and the people that they had relationships overseas, which caused a huge counterfeiting problem, a brand erosion problem, a trademark infringement problem, and they were causing more problems with regard to this new novel product than they were, it was counterproductive to what they were trying to accomplish. So that gives you a good sense of kind of how that all happens from an employee perspective, a vendor supplier perspective, to how it impacts the actual consumer. So while Lisa's talking about being productive and learning and how to do things more properly, I'm going to share with you guys some statistics on why you should be scared, okay? So these statistics up here are fairly staggering if you look at it from how it impacts employees and businesses. And the reason I put that up here is because I think that it's important for people to understand the impact of failure to protect our employees and our businesses. It's more than just dollars and cents. It also has to do with the safety of the people that we value most and that are running our businesses. So there are statistics out there that suggest that conducting a robust screening process can tremendously impact this. And if you look at the statistics, they talk about how stress in the workplace is also something that dramatically impacts your employees' performance and their ability to do what you need to do, which is drive to your goals and drive revenue or whatever projects that you're working on. So we referenced the background screening process. Some of this information, we talk about doing criminal background checks and we talk about doing a variety of other things, but just people inaccurately putting information on their applications. You guys might remember the former CEO of Yahoo. He misrepresented what his training was, and that cost him millions and millions of dollars, a very large publicly held company. So make sure that you're verifying information beyond just conducting criminal background checks. This is a huge thing we'll talk about a little bit later on. Intellectual property is something I'm pretty passionate about. I testify as an expert. I work with a lot of brands and a lot of clients on intellectual property. I think that we think of it as unless it's impacting the public, safety, and so forth, but I think the economic impact on it is serious. $1 trillion industry. We know that it funds organized crime and other issues around the world. But if you look at it, if you have a brand out there and you're losing out on that kind of money, it's a pretty serious thing. So protect, register, and enforce your trademarks and IP so that others are not taking advantage. And then as we hire those employees, I think it's crucial that we understand that the impact of keeping a safe work environment, addressing accidents, as well as workers' comp claims that can arise in the course and scope, and dealing with fraudulent claims that can impact the bottom line, our ex-mod rates, and things like that as we deal with that. In California especially, we fight that, and all employers end up paying for, unless they're self-insured or there's some sort of a captive arrangement, those types of employers end up paying for the fraudulent activity as a result to workers' comp and other insurance-related claims. So risk exposure, we talked about embezzlement and fraud, and I bring this up because people often think that, well, embezzlement and fraud, that only happens in big organizations, and it's only going to occur if we're a large company. We've worked with 5 or 10 companies recently where phishing and hacking attacks have caused their CFO and other accounting people to wire funds to fraudsters, also wiring funds to intermediaries, and those funds are typically gone. So I think that it's super important in your businesses to raise some exposure, and there's some great training around that to help employees recognize phishing and hacking attempts that really give fraudsters access to information, money, and a lot of other information that can cause harm, whether it's tangible or intangible. Accidents, I think safety is super important. I think that many of our clients fail to recognize and understand how to report and deal with accidents that occur legitimately in the workplace to get their employees back to work, safely, and report them properly so that they're not in a situation where they're wondering if this is a fraudulent claim or a non-fraudulent claim. So serious issues there. I've talked a little bit about counterfeiting and trademark and diversion issues. A lot of clients may not have a counterfeiting or trademark infringement issue, but I think diversion is super important. And what diversion means is that, in essence, there's a legitimate product in the supply chain that ends up in the hands of the wrong people. So this is when you see products on online e-commerce sites that may be legitimate. So protecting and doing diligence to make sure that you protect your supply chain can be super, super important when you're talking about life cycle or product and making sure that the brand is being represented appropriately. A good example is this: we have a client in the high-end watch maker, and they only sell through high-end retailers, Rodeo Drive and Aspen and places like that. So they noticed a spike in increase in revenue, and they kept trying to understand why. And what they had realized is that their legitimate retailers were setting up online shops selling their product, which was really not a money problem, it was more of a brand awareness problem. So to understand that they were doing this and prove it and deal with it in a business context was really, really important for them. We touched on workers' comp claims a little bit, but specifically dealing with and responding to and documenting claims in a timely fashion is super important, and also dealing with issues as they come up to investigate and determine if these people who claim to be working or to sustain a work-related injury, what's their activity level, are they working elsewhere, and seize that benefit as soon as possible so that they can obviously deal with that. And litigation, there's a lot of different litigation that can happen from consumers, from people within your business, from your partners, but I think that being aware and documenting, having good solid business processes is always a great way to mitigate the exposure to litigation, which is fairly imminent, especially operating in California. The challenges I think as employers we have is that the speed at which we do business is heightened. We're having to be super, super accurate and avoid this potential litigation and exposure, and that there's sometimes too much information out there to make a good decision. And there's a ton of compliance. When we talk about this, we get into background screening and other things. The way we must do things, and the way we must document, and the way that we must hire and fire. There's so much compliance around it that if you don't have a trusted HR consultant or a good employment attorney, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble, especially at the rates in which we operate here in California. So I want to finish up by just a few things that we recommend that really can help greatly in mitigating risk. So pre-employment background screening solutions, we talked about verifying information, we talked about running criminal checks. In California, there's a lot of rules around how that happens and what you can do to discriminate it from hiring someone. But beyond that, I think it's super important that we look at screening for substance abuse and other things that we can use definitive information to mitigate risk in our business, avoid the workplace violence, avoid the potential accidents, and keep the people out of our business that can elevate risk down the road. Doing due diligence on those vendors and suppliers and understanding who they are, where they operate, and how they might expose you to unneeded risk before you get into a situation where you're relying on them to supply you with a product or to lean on for financial reasons. So really, really easy and discreet ways to do that. And accident response training managers understanding how to recognize, report, and respond to alleged accidents in the workplace, and monitor safety and compliance around people that may be touching sensitive things or dealing with equipment and other high-risk stuff. Workers' comp claims investigations is a key thing, and I think that the key point here is timeliness. Don't let those things go on for long periods of time. Claims can linger for 2, 3, 4 years, really impact the bottom line. So reporting quickly and investigating quickly and thoroughly are great ways to kind of contain that cost and avoid prolonged increased claims to workers' comp down the road. And actively monitoring, watching, and protecting what you can have online on the brands. And it sounds like later today we're going to talk about spying on our competitors, but I think that it's really important to monitor the brands and the trademarks that you possess and making sure that you're enforcing those IP rights that are very difficult to acquire and to register. So again, I appreciate everyone's time, and I appreciate the people from my office being here. And Steve, thank you very much for having me.